Alright, so it's a new book I picked up. Well, my mom got it for me actually. I'm on chapter 7. I only had it for like 3 days now, if I'm not mistaken. But I got right to it as best as I could. I kind of was slacking for a little bit. Not slacking, but I just was giving it a rest. Reading does take a lot of focus and energy, so to speak. So it's called Cold Hit. Linda Fairstein is the author, and I think that's her. And I read a bit about her. I can't even really remember, but I just would say in the introduction it says a lot about how she has like a few books, trilogy, something like that, and they're like pretty famous as usual. You know, these books usually don't make it out there unless they're like the New York Times bestseller or something. Speaking of New York, I believe this book is setting is in New York, and it's a crime scene investigation type of deal. There's a let's say somebody was murdered, and actually might have been a sexual assault case. Oh, it was a girl who could have been sexually assaulted but also murdered. They they threw her over. They threw her in the ocean, and they had her tied up, stuff like that. That's pretty much the whole beginning. She had abrasions, and it's they talk about a little bit of the personal stuff about how some of them, would say that they actually do have some sort of like, sometimes they're not, like sometimes they shouldn't be the one on the case, like they got to kind of divide up the work properly based on it, like expectations, not expectations, based on like, you know, like, like if they're, if they're even in the spirits or whatever, cahoots, whatever they call it, to, deal with said murder at the time and said cases. And, I believe there's one of the main characters is a guy named Michael, and he's big and intimidating, if I'm not mistaken. And then the main character, I believe her name's Cooper, if I'm not mistaken. She's a female police officer. I believe in the beginning they tried to say that if things don't move along, that they might bring in the FBI or something like that, like the feds or something they called it. Let me see. Let me try to. The chapter I just read was I believe they got to their first physical suspect, and I believe the guy's name is Caxton, something Caxton. See, it's right there if you can see it. And he's like a guy that, I guess this is a pretty, I don't know how far back this book goes, but he's saying he knew Picasso, if I'm not mistaken, or all this silly stuff about they were at some place that had like beautiful paintings that were big as a wall. The guy Caxton, if I'm not mistaken, was saying one girl he had finally was a little more, intriguing than like statues that they were like. It was all a lot of that was revolving around art. Like they have like really famous um paintings in like rooms that they never let people see it and stuff like that. And they got statues and all this cool stuff. And I believe the girl, if I'm not mistaken, the woman they're asking him about, or they ask him about all of his like, relatives, like his daughters who they are now living in Europe. And there's like some connoisseurs or something like that that go back and forth from, I believe it said France to the U.S. or Europe to the U.S. Um, Three daughters, and they didn't like his spouse. I believe the spouse was actually younger or something like that, and the daughters are all married and living in Europe. And I believe the spouse at the time, he's a three-time widow and a thrice widow, I believe they call it. And the girl they're asking about at the time, um, what was I gonna say? The girl, oh, she was like a second place Miss America and some other pageant she did well in. And let me see, I believe the chapter before this, they are trying to like wrap, like trying to get their ideas together, and they end up going out to eat a few times. It talks about how they go out to eat a few times to talk about the cases. Um, let me see. There's a little bit more like some of their tendencies based on like cases they take or let other officers have them. I thought that was pretty cool the way they brought that up. And I believe right before this, it was this one, or it was this one and the one before this, or something like that they were doing conferences and trying to divide up the assignments and stuff like that. So that's pretty much it so far. I'm 6 chapters in. I'm on chapter 7 now. I just figured I'd try to sum it up and do a little review so I can. That usually helps me kind of like retain the information a lot better. Sometimes I try to do it while I'm reading, or I like look back a few lines up to like, if I'm spacing out or something after a sec. So I've been doing pretty well with these books lately to be a good reader that retains the information. That's my biggest thing. I'd take retaining information over finishing, like especially at this point. But that's not rocket science. Like people have been doing that, been saying that. You know what I mean? Plenty of people, you know what I mean, would be saying, I want to really remember the story or try to follow it as long as I could, maybe forget about it a while later and say, man, I read that book. I remember most of it. Stuff like that, classic school stuff like book reports and whatnot, essays. And I was gonna say, I know there's plenty of people out there that might even say it helps them go to sleep, just going through the words real quick, like working their eyes and stuff. And situations like I don't know, I would say like waiting room, right, ordeals, like magazines, obviously, or like I wouldn't be surprised if people read books on planes and stuff, or on the train. Obviously, you might see people reading books on the train, stuff like that. But that doesn't mean they're just doing duration quick or like time. You know what I mean? They could be also trying to, or very well, um, pretty good at, retaining the information as well. Obviously I'm not the best reader, but I'm very proud of myself. I think I'm reaching 20 books or even more than 20 books so far. And only two of them, if I'm not mistaken, were children's books that were not much content, or what is it? Not much dense reading. More like, two sentences, three sentences usually on a page or something. Not too bad, actually. One of them was a chapter book with no pictures, but it was still very easy. It was like a children's book. And the other one, I always talk about this, it was by Kevin Hart, allegedly. And that was another children's book, but it did have like 200 pages, although there wasn't many words on each page. But all right, thank you, guys, ladies and gents. Gotta get back to reading this. Hopefully, I get to chapter 7 and not be too lazy.